I stumbled upon a mystery, folks, I want to share with you guys. Last week, I made a video about the military putting floats on a C-47, and I did a bunch of research, but the initial problem I found was the US military wasn't the first people trying to put a DC-3 on floats. The first reference I found was from 1935, the exact same year that the DC-3 first flew, and that wasn't an American company, that was Fokker, a company in Europe that is more famous for building World War I fighter planes for Germany. In fact, the Fokker DR-1 triplane, which we are also restoring here on the channel, but we'll get to that later. Why was Fokker in 1935 making floats for the DC-3? But not just that, look next to it. Fokker was also designing a bolt-on kit to turn a passenger DC-3 into a bomber. I stumbled upon this on the forum called Secret Projects, and a user actually came across a Fokker model, a display model, that was found in a scrapyard after Fokker went bankrupt. It looked like a fantasy model, you know, pretty funny, a DC-3 looking like a poor man's B-17. But when you dug deeper, you can actually find that Fokker was preparing to turn civilian DC-3s bought in the United States into European war machines. And why was that? Well, this is a very complicated story, folks. I hope you're going to learn something. We're going to have to enlist help from my friend Dan. He's an aviation expert, and he's going to tell us about one of the most influential air disasters in aviation history going back to 1931.
Yeah, that one accident was like nationwide. It was earth-shaking. The main guy that got killed was Knute Rockne, and he was the head football coach for Notre Dame. So he was a high-profile guy, and he died in the airplane. He was flying in a tri-motor, which was an all-wooden airplane, wooden spars and all that kind of stuff. And the airplane had gotten wet numerous times, and a wing failed in flight, and like 8 or 9 people died. I mean, a wing fell off, and the crash site is still out in this empty field out in the middle of Kansas. And I found it and went out there and visited it a couple months ago. But it was because of that crash that both the manufacturers and the public and the CAA demanded an all-metal airplane. And that crash was really called the birth certificate of commercial aviation. And it was because of that crash that they sent the letter to Donald Douglas that said, we want an all-metal airplane. We don't want any more wings falling off. And that's where the emphasis turned immediately to all-metal airplanes.
The whole reason why the DC-1, the DC-2, and DC-3 ever became into existence was because of a crash of a Fokker aircraft. Well, this story has more twists and turns than an M. Night Shyamalan video, but the DC-3, of course, we know was victorious, but what about its competition at the time?
Its only competition when it came out was the 247, and if you've ever been inside of a Boeing 247, once the DC-2 went into production, they stopped production on the 247. There's no use because everybody wanted the DC-2 at that point. No competition. The thing was just so much better. It was faster, sleeker, bigger space, more versatile, more payload, more everything. Douglas just absolutely amazing difference.
Okay, I know we're blasting through history, folks, but the age of the tri-motor is done. The Fokker tri-motor and Ford tri-motor are both parked and replaced by all-metal passenger aircraft, the front runner of which is the DC-2, the DC-3's younger sister. But the DC-3 came very quickly after. And why does our guest Dan know so much about DC-3s? Well, he actually owns one, and this isn't his first time on YouTube.
This is 3 years ago. And they said, you know, we want this YouTube guy to fly your airplane at Oshkosh and go out and give him a couple laps in it.
So we're at AirVenture 2017, and somebody thought it was a good idea to let me fly this thing.
And I said, we're going to give a YouTube guy a ride in the airplane? I was like, no way. We need to give a ride to, like, real people, not a Canadian YouTuber. Why are we wasting the gas for that? But turns out it was a fun flight, and he and I became friends, and he tolerates my ribbing very well.
All right, nice job, man. Thank you. Next one.
He's actually a good stick. Don't tell him I said that because he'll get the big head.
Don't let the joking around fool you, folks. Dan and Flight Shops love each other. In fact, they've teamed up and made this really cool initiative to help make general aviation safer. And I'll link a lot of that below. So the DC-3 made aviation safer in general, but Europe also wanted to get in on the game. As you know, the DC-3 and DC-2 basically eliminated all competition. And what was Europe going to do? Well, they were going to buy themselves some DC-3s. And how did they do that?
All the DC-3s were initially built in Santa Monica. It's just a question of getting them delivered. So there's lots of airplanes that went to Europe because they built them in California. They test flew them and put a few hours on them, and then they took the wings off of them, shipped them by boat over to Europe, and then Fokker had the contract for reassembling and test flying it once they got over there.
You're hearing that correctly. Fokker, of all companies, had the contract to assemble and sell the pre-war DC-3 in Europe. I went through the production list and did my research. I found about 39 of them that were classified as Fokker Douglas DC-3s. About half of them went to the USSR, became Li-2s, and the other half was distributed through Europe, including going to KLM, Swiss Air, and Air France. But it doesn't stop there. Why does Dan know so much about Fokker DC-3s? Well, here's another twist, folks. His DC-3 is actually a Fokker DC-3.
This airplane was built in '38. It's an actual DC-3, not a C-47, so it's way, way, way before World War II.
I got to do the takeoff and the landing.
It's still a Douglas airplane, but Fokker reassembled a lot of airplanes and maintained a lot of airplanes for Douglas in Europe because Douglas didn't have a presence in Europe at the time. Mine was 2054, built in '38. So it's a pre-war airplane, and it went to Swiss Air, and it got an N number of HBIRO, and it flew for Swiss Air for many years, just in normal passenger service.
Well, it goes without saying that Fokker is one smart company. They are now selling the one aircraft that almost put them out of business. But let's get back to the original question. This is almost becoming full circle. The DC-3 was designed to save lives after the Fokker F-10 crash, and now Fokker is making plans for the DC-3 to start taking lives in a war-type format. So who ordered all this? This is in German. You would think, hey, it must have been Germany. They were causing a ruckus in Europe in the late 30s. But it really wasn't. My research on the Secret Projects Forum and the Dutch Aviation Forum has led me to the conclusion that it was actually Swiss Air and Swedish Airlines that approached Fokker to turn the DC-3 into a war machine. And why is that? That sounds crazy. Like, Switzerland has always been neutral in all these wars. But the reason why they've been neutral is because they're smart. They knew something was happening. They wanted an option to turn their passenger airplanes into a military tool to help them defend their homeland. You see, they knew something was happening. If you actually do the research, Switzerland had a pretty good air force and really guarded their borders. They were on top of it. So they were the ones that went in and said, hey, let's figure out what the DC-3 can do. I know that Douglas had very similar plans, but this is definitely forward thinking for somebody outside of the aviation industry. So let's just go through and see what kind of stuff Switzerland and Swedish Air were interested in turning their DC-3 into. Okay, this is crazy interesting. Let's start up here with the top left corner. This is the troop version. As you can see, it's got the troops sitting just like the troop seats in the C-47, and it's got a larger door here on the bottom. Let's move to the right. We got benzene transport, which means fuel. So you can see that's actually a big fuel bladder that is sitting in the middle of a DC-3. Very smart. Let's head on over here to the motor transport. Look at this. So they were thinking, well, we need to, transfer motors just in case one of these aircraft, needs an engine out in the field. And look at this. It kind of looks like they wanted to load it from the belly, like a belly pod, because as you notice, there's no cargo door on it. And then let's head over here to the right. We got the ambulance. So you look at it, it actually sets up like a sleeper where the beds or the gurneys are one on top of each other, just like the DST. Let's head over here to the left, and this is the bomb thrower, and this is what starts the whole video. Look at it. This is definitely the poor man's B-17. You got 2 turrets on the very top. You have a major bolt-on turret at the bottom. This is so you can shoot forward, and there's a lower gun underneath. This again is so very, very cool. And then to the right, we got the seaplane, and this is a straight set floats. And really, really interesting, folks. Let's go to the right. This is basically a C-47. Look at the cargo door. This is what the airplane came into. So funny enough, they were making plans for a C-47 that came out only about 3 or 4 years later. This aircraft is a C-47 derivative of a DC-3, exactly what Fokker, Swedish Airlines, and Swiss Air were planning. So it's just, oh man, it's just crazy. Another thing I want to touch on is, if you guys have been following this channel for a while, you know that 100% of the proceeds for this channel is going towards our Fokker project, the Fokker DR1. We've been working on it since the summertime, but it has been absolutely nightmare to get wood. And finally, this is some good news, folks. Our wood, our 22-foot pieces of wood have arrived into Toronto, where our wings are being built by our buddy Peter. I have to say a big thank you to Sid and the handsomest guy in Canadian aviation, Craig Brookhouse. They had to get an enclosed grocery truck to actually grab the wood from aircraft spruce and drive it into Toronto to keep it safe from the weather. It was just a madhouse trying to get anything done here during the COVID-19 crisis, but thank you guys for hanging in there. There's going to be a lot more Fokker stuff coming in as we build the Fokker, but soon we got to get into a DC-3 that I have found, and let's learn about that more in the next episode. Please check out Flight Chops' video right here with him flying with Dan in the Fokker DC-3. Check out my latest video right here if you haven't seen it, and we'll be seeing you guys in the next one for some big DC-3 found news. Bye.